So, have you ever stared at a totally blank page, practically paralyzed by the fear of bad grammar or the immense pressure to sound smart? Well, what if I told you that there is absolutely no single, static, correct way to write? None. Instead, writing is actually much more like a performance, a totally dynamic act that constantly shifts, and it depends entirely on who is sitting in your audience.
Welcome to The Explainer. I am so incredibly thrilled to have you here with us. Today, we are building what we call a code-switching toolkit. We're going to explore exactly how we can all adapt our communication across wildly different professional and public spheres. The goal? Making sure your ideas genuinely resonate no matter who you're talking to. If you want to master the art of writing for any audience, you are in the exact right place.
Here is our quick roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. The rules of register. 2. Mastering expository mechanics. 3. Inside the ivory tower. 4. Writing across cultural divides. And finally, 5. The public-facing pivot. Let's just dive right in.
Starting us off, Section 1, the rules of register.
The actual term linguists use to describe this shifting performance we just talked about is register. Experts like M.A.K. Halliday define register as a variety of language used for a very particular communicative purpose, and it's really determined by 3 core things. First is the field, meaning your subject matter and your goal. Second is the mode, which is the channel you're using, like are you writing an email or giving a spoken speech. And third is the tenor, which refers to the actual social relationships among the people communicating. Every single time you write, whether it's firing off a quick Slack message to a coworker or drafting a highly formal proposal for a huge client, you are subconsciously negotiating these 3 factors. To put this into perspective, Martin Jewes created a spectrum of formality that perfectly illustrates how naturally we shift our style based on our relationship with our audience. Right at the very top, you have the frozen register. This is static, unchanging language, kind of like reciting a pledge. Then we move down through formal language used for presentations to strangers, down to consultative for two-way exchanges, like a chat between a doctor and patient. And it goes all the way down to casual, and finally, intimate language for our closest friends and family members. I mean, you wouldn't exactly use your family's intimate inside jokes during a formal corporate pitch, right? That right there is register in action.
Moving right along to Section 2, Mastering Expository Mechanics. Now, when we look at foundational undergraduate expository writing syllabi, they reveal a really crucial point. Clear communication is not some sort of innate magic. It's actually a sequential, entirely learnable process. It requires moving systematically through stages like pre-writing, drafting, revising, and editing. It's fundamentally about dissecting intricate, messy ideas and expressing them with crystal clarity.
And to do that, we really need to reframe how we think about grammar. Look, it isn't just a list of strict, boring rules designed by old teachers to punish you with red ink. As rhetoricians, all the way back to Cicero, have known, grammar is a deeply strategic tool. Correct grammar establishes your ethos, your personal credibility, because let's be real, a reader just won't trust a complex argument if it's riddled with run-on sentences. It also physically builds your logos. The actual logic of your argument relies on clear sentence boundaries and accurate verb tenses. We use active verbs and modals to show fine nuance, and we use transitions to seamlessly stitch our ideas together.
So, how do we practically apply this without panicking over every single comma? Well, 3 simple steps. First, identify and target your own specific error patterns. Don't try to fix every little thing at once. Second, learn the actual correct vocabulary instead of just guessing. And third, and guys, this one is absolutely vital, edit for grammatical correctness as the absolute, literal final step of the writing process. When you are drafting your ideas early on, just let them flow. Save all that intense polishing for the very end.
Okay, Section 3, Inside the Ivory Tower.
There is a really sharp contrast between the professional worlds of academia and the general public. Academic writing prioritizes extreme, meticulous precision. It relies heavily on specialized jargon, explicitly targeting peer scholars who already share that complex vocabulary. Public writing, however, completely flips the script. It prioritizes broad accessibility, relies on clear language and common sense, and actively aims for real-world impact with a very broad audience. Obviously, this creates quite a massive divide.
To really understand the academic side of this, we can turn to scholars like Michael Warner and Judith Butler. They argue that public writing often leans too heavily on common sense. But, as they point out, common sense can often be corrupt with hidden biases and unexamined ideology. To them, using complex jargon is actually a necessary defense mechanism to avoid falling into those ideological traps.
It's essentially a defense of high complexity in the pursuit of absolute, undistorted precision. But on the exact opposite side of this debate, we have journalists like Nicholas Kristof. He famously reprimanded academia, arguing that PhD programs foster a culture that basically glorifies arcane unintelligibility. He argues that some of the brightest minds are rendering themselves totally irrelevant to today's greatest public debates, simply because their academic culture disdains broad impact and audience accessibility. It's fascinating, right? Both sides are making a very deliberate rhetorical choice. One prioritizes peer-level theoretical purity, and the other prioritizes broad societal engagement.
Which brings us to Section 4, Writing Across Cultural Divides.
Think about what happens when you write in your mother tongue. You're mostly relying on subconscious rules that you acquired really early in life. It's built on a linguistic foundation you already possess. But writing in a target, second language, that requires a massive cognitive load. The writer isn't just learning the basic target language, they are simultaneously trying to master the highly specialized professional register of that language. It is a really heavy dual burden of managing both content and translation all at once.
And it's not just a matter of vocabulary. It is a major cultural shift. English professional writing, for instance, demands very strict cultural norms. We're talking a highly organized structure, a strict hierarchical arrangement of ideas, and super explicit clarity. The reader really shouldn't have to read between the lines. So if a writer comes from a culture that deeply values implication over explicit, bold transitions, their writing might actually be perceived as disorganized by a native English reader. This is exactly why international emails or global team projects can sometimes feel a bit disconnected. It's quite literally a clash of register expectations.
And finally, Section 5, the public-facing pivot.
So how exactly do we bridge this massive communication divide? Well, enter public-facing scholarship. This is academic or highly expert work deliberately designed and translated to be relevant to a much broader audience. By utilizing platforms like op-eds, blogs, podcasts, and yes, explainers just like this one, scholars can foster real engagement, educate the wider public, and directly inform policy. It's a method of taking all that rigorous, peer-reviewed knowledge and skillfully code-switching it into a register that the public can actually digest and use. There is, however, a really big institutional roadblock here. You've probably heard of the publish or perish tenure track at universities. The metrics that actually determine a scholar's job security and promotion heavily favor publishing in paywalled, highly specialized academic journals over writing a brilliant, accessible think piece for the general public. So scholars who want to do this kind of public-facing work often have to do it essentially as extra credit, battling a system that doesn't formally reward their broader societal impact. Fortunately, though, the academic world is slowly trying to adapt. We're now seeing core university curricula explicitly highlighting topics like writing for specific purposes and audiences. Institutions are finally realizing that, whether it's launching an academic blog to test a new partnership or penning an op-ed to influence real-world policy, total flexibility in your writing register is absolutely a modern survival skill. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a provocative thought. What is your own primary, default writing register? Are you maybe a bit stuck in the ivory tower? Or conversely, perhaps you're a bit too casual for your current professional goals? How will you actively use this code-switching toolkit, really analyzing your field, your mode, and your tenor to expand your impact the very next time you sit down to write? The audience is out there waiting for your performance. Make it count. Thanks so much for learning with me today.